Hi, welcome to the Awakened Woman. I'm Barbara Robbins,
And I'm Brianna Cox.
and today we're talking about redefining financial success for women, shifting from traditional models to fulfilling value-aligned goals. So tell me, Brianna, what does that mean to you?
I feel like a lot of us can get caught up in the Western world claptrap hamster wheel, so to speak, where we feel in order to be financially successful, we have to work really hard, we have to make a lot of sacrifices, we have to follow artificial frameworks and templates, depending on our line of work. You know, if we're entrepreneurs, we may feel like we have to do content where we chase algorithms. And for me, none of that is true. I really feel like when we are aligned authentically to ourselves and we are aligning our passion and purpose and we come up with a framework that feels good to us, that's organic, I feel like money just flows from then on out.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and I have this as a declaration, that all the best comes to me easily and effortlessly. Wait a minute, start that over again. All the best, I guess maybe it's not the best right now. All the best comes to me easily and effortlessly with joy. And I swear to God, when I work at stuff, it's like it doesn't happen. But when it's almost like when I'm not even paying attention, it's like all the best stuff happens. My best clients, my best idea to go to a restaurant, my best pair of boots. It's effortless.
Yeah, I agree. I really feel as though when we're in alignment, that's not just the internal alignment, right? When we're aligned internally, we're aligned externally. And so what is for us will find us.
Yeah, so getting aligned, that's the interesting thing here.
And I feel like we've all been in a place like where we're not, right? We go through those periods, like you and I were talking about that earlier today, how like we've been feeling kind of off during this Mercury retrograde and the holiday seasons. And so it's not like, you know, even though we may know that, like walking in it on a day-to-day basis, you know, sometimes just that awareness of like, oh, hey, like am I really in alignment right now? Am I really being authentic and honest about what feels right to me, or am I trying to follow what feels right for somebody else in order to get where I want to be? And if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense, you know?
Oh, yeah, and I know there's because I'm empathic, there's so many times that I walk through the day and I'm like confused and overwhelmed and unfocused and brain fog, and it finally takes me till maybe like 3 p.m. and I go, wait a minute, is this my stuff? Or am I feeling somebody else's stuff? And then I test, and it's like, oh, crap, this is somebody else's stuff. And then I clear it, and then, oh, look, I'm bright and shiny. I didn't have to go through my whole day going, what's wrong with me?
Absolutely. I feel like, you know, a lot of us have inherited these unconscious programs from our parents, you know, who were raised in a society that really promoted this idea, you know, work hard and that's how you make a living and everything. Even if you listen to the words, it's like work hard, make a living. It's very hyper masculine, and we need the masculine energy. Don't get me wrong, we absolutely do, because the masculine is like, you know, the container for the water that's the feminine. But I feel like this society is still very masculine, and when we're in too much masculine energy, we're pushing all the time, and we have to really know how to attract. It's like the action part should just be putting things in, how would I explain it, sort of making steps or taking action steps, but not in a way that's like out of alignment or inauthentic or artificial, but just taking actions toward what we know is aligned and then sitting back and letting it happen. And I think that's the part that's hard, because we have these unconscious programs in our DNA that go back generations that tell us that no, we're not going to make money just a attracting. We have to go out there and chase it. We have to go out there and club it over the head and drag it home. And that's just not the reality. And as things shift and as we start dealing more with higher technology and all of these things, really technology is giving us that ability. And I used to be anti-technology. Now I'm not. But it's a tool that's giving us the ability to attract even more, because now we have even less menial tasks that we can do, which allows us to attract even more, to be even more in alignment with where we're trying to go.
I'm all about going with the flow. The masculine feels, well, women, water, flow. Masculine is the rock, the container. That's masculine feels very linear and and mentally focused, where the flow is more like a heart kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know how much you wanted to maybe share about your own experience in this journey of prosperity and maybe some of the lessons you learned along the way with the topic of the masculine and feminine within your practice. Maybe you could even explain to the listeners like what you do for a living and how that's transformed and how this all ties into our topic. I think they would love to hear your story.
Well, I'm an energy healer and teacher, and I've been doing energy healing since 2001, when I accidentally discovered it and that I could do it. I was looking for someone to help my daughter, my younger daughter especially, who had a lot of issues just pretty much since she was born. And I would go from, like, she had really severe diaper rash, and then she had to have tubes put in her ears before she was 2, and her tonsils removed before she was 3. And then she was being like hyper and panicking and just all kinds of, not as horrible as some people have it, thank God, but it was horrible to me. And I was taking her from doctor to doctor to doctor. And finally, I took her to one. I didn't even know what, at that point they were just saying, take her here, and I wouldn't even question what they did.
Right.
So I took her to this one doctor, and people were going, oh, he'll take care of her in like 2 minutes. Don't worry, it's gonna be great. But we were there for 50 minutes, and he just mumbled a few words here and there and touched her standing behind her and touched her on the shoulders a few times, and the 50 minutes was up, and he said, that was it. And I shook his hand to say thank you. I figured all doctors are like, take 2, call me in the morning, so I wasn't expecting to see anything immediately. So I shook his hand and said thank you, and I felt him look into my eyes and like do not just a reading. It's like he took all my data and just input it into himself. And I didn't know what that was, but like, okay. And so we left to go home, and right after that, he was doing a lecture demo, and my daughter was feeling too sick, so we didn't stay for it. So about 10 minutes into the car ride home, I started feeling tingling and heat on my back. And I knew that was a sign of a healing, but everybody that I knew that knew what he was doing was in his lecture demo, so I couldn't contact them. So we went home, and I have scoliosis, and 2 weeks before that, I had a lift put in my right shoe. That was the only way I could stay in alignment. And I came home, and I took my shoes off, and I went and looked in the mirror, and my shoulders were straight. I'm like,
oh,
what?
wow.
I know.
Oh, wow.
And like every 2 seconds before I went to sleep, I kept going back and looking in the mirror. Are they still straight? Are they still straight? It's like I was nuts. And they were still straight. It's like, whoa. So then I went to sleep. It's like, hurry up, go to sleep. And then, boom, I wake up in the morning like, doop, and I ran into the bathroom to look in the mirror, and my shoulders were still straight. And I'm like, what? So as soon as I could, I called somebody who had stayed for the lecture demo the night before. And I said, what was Dr. Ewan doing at 8 p.m. last night? And because it was early enough in the lecture demo, she was able to reconstruct it, and she said he was working on somebody who wore a lift in her shoe. I went,
wow.
there you go. So I
Wow.
already had an appointment for an electrodermal scan that morning. So I went there and I told her what had happened, and she did the reading. An electrodermal scan is kind of like a circuit tester for your body. So she did the reading, and she says, well, it's saying that your back is in upheaval. I went, well, that's right. And then I made an appointment to go see my chiropractor for that afternoon. I went there, and I told her what was going on, and she took a look at me. I don't know what all chiropractors are like, but this one, she has you stand there, and she looks at you first and takes some notes to see how your alignment is. And she looked at me, and she says, well, you look really good. And I said, Lana, remember, I have to have my shoes on. I had to have the lift put in my shoe. And my shoes aren't on right now. And she looked at me, and she looked at her notes, and she looked at me, and looked at her notes, and looked back at me.
She thought she was going crazy for a second, yeah.
And looked back at me, and she said, like 2 octaves lower, who is that man? So I said, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. So he was doing another lecture demo later in the week, and I was there. And he was calling people on stage, and in 2 minutes or less, he was getting rid of their pain. And this is physical pain. And I'm like, oh, my God, I need to learn this because I need to practice this on my kids. Schlepping them all over creation to go to the best doctors available.
What type of energy modality was he using?
He was using his own thing. It was called, at the time it was called Chinese energetic medicine.
Okay.
And so he was there doing these lecture demos to get people to come to his workshop the following weekend. And so I went to the workshop, and just because we only have a half an hour to talk, I'm going to cut the story short because it could take a whole half hour. I went there and I learned it, and it turned out it was really easy for me. And then I started practicing it, and I was just doing it. I went on AOL. That's how far back this was. It was in 2001, and there, AOL was like the only thing around. So I went on there.
I remember that.
So I went on there and I opened up a private chat room called Pain Gone, and I would practice. People would come in there. I would do 2 to 6 healings, sessions a day, or I'd work on 2 to 6 people a day. I was in there for 6 days a week, and by the end, and this is all free. And by the end of a year of doing this, I had worked on over 800 people with an almost 100% success rate at reducing or eliminating their symptoms.
Amazing.
And I was just doing it to practice because I didn't have anyone to practice on. And then, like after about a month, I guess people started saying, "Thank you so much. What can I pay you? Can I give you something?" And so people started sending me like homemade jam and stuff like that.
That's
and then
cool.
I had another workshop to go to because you had to take 6. You had 3 workshops, 3 different levels, and you had to take them twice. So by the 3rd month before I went to the next workshop, I heard in my head, after this workshop, you can start charging a set fee.
There you go.
Okay.
And so basically, in a nutshell, that is what got you started on your healer path.
Yeah. I wasn't a healer before that. I was an art teacher and a stay-at-home mom.
So how do you feel that tied into prosperity and everything that we're talking about today? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of women out there that are either interested in being healers or are healers, like you and I are healers. In different ways, you and I are healers, What would you say to them as far as how they can, manifest or attract prosperity from that feminine model that we've been talking about?
That just reminded me of what happened beforehand, before I went to his workshop. And this was the real key because I had gotten divorced and I was a stay-at-home mom. I had no income. I wasn't getting the amount of child support that I needed. I think we were in the court about that. And I kept looking up to the heavens and saying, what is my job? And I kept hearing back, take care of your children. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, I don't have any money. But every time I would ask that, it would be, take care of your children. And one night the kids wanted to go out to dinner, and I had enough pennies that I felt, okay, we can go out to dinner tonight. And at dinner they said, hey, there's a bookstore right next to the restaurant. Can we go there after dinner? So I'm like, sure. So we went there, and they were old enough that I could leave them alone in the children's section, and I went over to the self-help section because I've always been interested in that, even since high school. And it was like I walked over there, and I felt like, there was nobody there. But what it felt like was someone put their hands on the sides of my head and turned my head to the left and focused it down, and then focused my eyes on this one book. It was Richard Gerber's Vibrational Medicine for the 21st Century. And so I picked it up, and it was like an encyclopedia of all different kinds of vibrational medicine techniques. And I bought the book, and I started playing with it. And that was my introduction to healing. But I still I would say to all that is, what is my job? And I still got the answer, take care of your children. But it was from there that I started taking my daughter to doctors who weren't just traditional doctors, but more
which led to you, meeting the doctor who was a healer, which led to you activating, or deepening your natural healing abilities that were dormant and bringing them out to the surface.
Exactly.
Setting up for what you're doing today.
Exactly.
So how would you say, just, this probably is the last question I'll ask because I think we're running short on time, but how would you say that this all ties in to what we're talking about? What would you say to the healers out there, how they can attract that prosperity? Healers like you definitely showed the journey of how serendipitous everything was, but what would be sort of your last, piece of advice, to these women out there that might want to be attracting prosperity in the same way that you are?
Of course, the first thing is always going with the flow and taking inspired action. Don't take action because it's in your head to do it, but you feel good about it. Like it feels right. Like I know that I know that I know that I know. It's in my bones. People can always come to me for help too. I won't refuse them. But it's the closer I was with Source, with feeling connected to all that is, and staying there, that's what helped to direct me the most, I think.
Yeah.
And then you just, you knock on doors, like, is this my mommy? Knock on door. Are you my mommy? No. Okay, go to the next door. Are you my mommy? No. And you just go until it opens up and like, yes, I'm your mommy.
Nice. Yeah, I really resonate with that, and I really feel like it's the whole as above, so below, as within, so without principle, the Hermetic principle, which I don't consider myself to follow any particular belief system or philosophy. I consider myself, more of an omnist, where I just sort of pick and pull from different truths from different, places.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always liked the principle that when we're connected to Source, really that means we're connected to ourselves and vice versa. Like it's two sides of the same coin. And so if we're really connected to ourselves within, then we're connected to the source of that and vice versa, because it's that whole microcosm to the macrocosm of consciousness. And so I really resonate with that. And that really ties back into what we were saying in the beginning as far as when we're really in alignment, we're being authentic to who we are. And when we're authentic to who we are shining from that unique blueprint that nobody else can shine from. So
I have a
would just
question for you, and we still have about 10 minutes left. What was your journey to getting into alignment with yourself, your authentic alignment?
For me, I always like to tell people I was born in the underworld. And what I mean by that is I was literally born pretty much dead, for lack of a better terminology, and have died a few times since and come back. And I definitely have called myself the ambassador of my bloodline. I'm definitely here to break generational curses, to break trauma cycles, to break trauma loops, to really tie things up in my bloodline, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think that's really driven me. But even at a young age, like I had all of my what I call clair abilities activated, which are like, clairsentience, claircognizance, clairgustance, all of the, different senses that we have as humans, but just, being able to sense that in other dimensions. And so I kind of came in locked and loaded in that sense, and I really didn't know what to do with it. And so at a very young age, I was seeing and experiencing things that most people don't, and it really made it hard for me to be able to be grounded. And I was seeing a lot of things that might seem like fantasy to other people, but for me it was something I was tapping into in, the subconscious realms. And so I started playing around with spirituality at a very young age and exploring, and I had this attitude of wanting to explore the deepest, darkest hells and the highest heavens in order to really know who I was. And so even though I didn't know what shadow work was until I was in probably my late 30s, I knew intuitively or instinctively that I had to go through my underworld or my darkness in order to find who I was. And then later understanding the actual spirit science behind that, of some say 75, some say 85, some say up to 90% of who we are is actually in the subconscious, in the darkness, in the mother, in the womb. That made sense to me of why I had to go there first. And so in reclaiming those soul fragments lost in other lifetimes, ancestral fragments lost to ancestral trauma, soul fragments lost to my current lifetime trauma, and everything that I'd been through up until this point in time, and reclaiming that, I really started figuring out how to heal myself at a young age when it came to trauma. And, along the way, I would study things. I would study yoga. I became a Reiki master. I came up with some of my own modalities, one of which is called primordial dragonfire healing, where I actually remote project into a client's space in one of my dragon forms and use the fire of my breath for healing. I've also done what's called a spirit releasement, which is actually someone else's modality that I kind of tweaked, and I've used that to help clients walk through their own process of removing different types of spirit attachments. And what I found is, for me, Reiki was a little bit too masculine, in the sense where it was more light-based, and I realized early on that I was more dark-based. And so I started realizing, for me, working with more draconic energies, working with more reverse vortex where I'm taking things in and transmuting instead of projecting things out, worked for me. And that really ties into this whole topic because I mean, everybody has masculine and feminine qualities and traits, and it's important for us to honor that balance. But I do feel some people are more geared toward one or the other. And for me, I realized I was more geared toward the feminine. And so the more I acknowledged that and the more I owned that about myself, then the easier things got. But because of everything I'd gone through in my life, I felt almost forced into masculine roles or forced into more toxic feminine roles instead of feeling that ease of flow. And so in doing that trauma healing, just to bring this back around full circle, it allowed me to step more into my authenticity. In doing that inner work and helping others do the same, it allowed me to step more into my authenticity, which then shifted things. And the more I started breaking old paradigms that were in my bloodline, the more that I started rewriting my neural pathways and changing, my DNA essentially from that etheric standpoint, the more that things started shifting in my external reality. And so for me, it's been having to go through oblivion to find power and in surrender to who I was, my authentic self, surrendering to that. That was really what started shifting and unlocking things for me.
And what would you suggest to our listeners who would like to take their own journey of discovery?
I would say it starts with spending time with yourself, being able to set aside quiet time each day to reflect. Journaling is a wonderful tool. And this is just for beginners. I mean, just starting out. And then the more you get into it, the more you can start observing triggers. And then you can start maybe doing free flow, unconscious journeys, and then writing that down. And as you become more aware of yourself and the hidden components and what you might have repressed because maybe society said it wasn't okay to be like that, a lot of those aspects of self are actually part of our true self from childhood. What we call the inner child gets repressed into the shadow because we're told, oh, well, that's just fantasy, that's make-believe, that's not real. Or you can't behave like that because you're supposed to behave like this. And so those pieces of us, those vital pieces of us that make up who we are get pushed into the shadow. And so to me, the child, the inner child, the eternal child is really the most authentic version of ourselves. So as we were talking about earlier, Barbara, before we started the podcast of, play being so important, is that there needs to be fun and play because that's authentic. That's authentic. So I would just suggest that.
I remember doing like adults playing with Barbie dolls, quote unquote, with somebody to work through stuff, and it was like fun, but like you could. Oh, I used to have not Barbie dolls. I used to have a pretend husband and wife fight with my roommate. We'd come in college. We'd come home and we were just upset with the day. We weren't mad at each other, but like maybe some little thing would go wrong, like this dish didn't get washed or something, and we'd wind up making up this, because she was in theater too, and we'd make up this pretend husband and wife fight, and we would yell at each other, and we'd accuse each other of stuff, and by the end of it, we were like on the floor laughing so hard, but we got all our crap out from the day. It was really fun and really therapeutic.
I like that. That sounds super cathartic.
It was. Well, listeners, this has been our therapeutic 30 minutes for today with the Awakened Woman.
Thank you for tuning in, guys. Gals, yes. I should say. Ladies, goddesses.
Anybody.
Yeah.
Even the men have an awakened woman side inside of them.
Absolutely.
Maybe that should be our next topic. I don't know.
I like that.
Until next time, I'm Barbara.
And I'm Brianna.
And we are the Awakened Woman.